When I asked why he unilaterally made a family card for his in-laws, Robert laughed and said, "Because they're my family, of course they should have a family card, right? Got a problem with that? If you knew who took you in when you were all alone, you wouldn't be able to say such things, would you?" I was taken aback by his arrogant tone, which I had never heard before. Was Robert always this kind of person? "If you're grateful, you should do more for my family. Then I'll acknowledge you as part of the family. Until then, it's like you're on a provisional license." I had never heard of such a thing as a provisional phase in marriage. Robert pressed further, seeing me silent. "In other words, you're not yet a formal member of the family. If you don't like it, you can leave any time, okay? For now, our family is just the 5 of us. Useless parasites, out." Understood. After I immediately canceled all our joint credit cards and moved out. My name is Emily Wilder. 27 years old. I'm a freelance illustrator. I used to work as a designer for a major advertising agency, but I went independent 2 years ago when I got married, and now I work from home. My parents died in an accident when I was young. I was taken in by my maternal grandparents, but when I went to college, I moved back to the apartment near the city center where I lived with my parents, and I've been living there ever since. I met my husband, Robert, at the Italian restaurant where he worked. It was a place with a nice atmosphere, reasonable prices, and good food, so my colleagues and I started stopping by frequently. That's when Robert, the handsome waiter, became a topic of conversation. Robert was indeed good-looking. The manager once laughingly said that a good percentage of the regulars came for Robert, and it was easy to see why. I won't deny that I became one of Robert's fans because I thought he was cool. He was that much of a standout. However, for some reason, we rapidly grew closer, and before I knew it, we were being called a couple, and to my surprise, we ended up getting married. I don't remember much about that time. It's almost like I was drunk, and when I sobered up, there was a man I was calling my husband next to me. But even so, I loved Robert at that time and was happy. When I got married, I quit the company where I had been working as a designer and went independent. It was an amicable resignation, transferring the work I had been doing at the company to a freelance basis. Robert continued working at the Italian restaurant, with different working hours each day, sometimes late into the night. It became a bit difficult to keep working as usual, and I had always wanted to go independent, so I decided to take the plunge. "It's a good idea, Emily. It'll be easier on you, and it's good to keep doing the work you love." Robert agreed, and that's how our newlywed life started. We both didn't like flashy things, so we decided not to have a wedding ceremony and just register our marriage, meeting each other's families for a face-to-face greeting. Robert went to work, and I worked and did household chores at home. Our schedules were irregular, but we kept in touch and waited for each other to come home for meals. It was a happy and fun everyday life, and I thought, marriage is nice. But about a year after getting married, Robert suddenly said this, and everything fell apart. "My family wants to come over, is that okay?" he asked. Of course, I said it was fine. I had only met and briefly talked to Robert's family during our initial greeting, so I thought this would be a chance to get to know them better. Having lost my parents at a young age, I had always admired Robert's large family. But when his family of 4 arrived, I was left speechless. "Hey, which room is mine?" his sister asked as soon as she entered our house. Robert's sister, 32 years old, was 5 years older than both Robert and me, and I had heard she worked at a local supermarket. I was shocked by her rude manner, so different from the polite greeting she had given me when we first met. Robert's 18-year-old sister was also there, but in contrast, she didn't say a word and just stood there silently. I remember. She barely spoke when we first met for greetings. Hastened by Robert's sister, I showed the 2 sisters to the guest room, and Robert's parents to the room, which used to be my parents' room. It was the only Japanese-style room in the apartment, so I thought it would be best for them. After settling into their rooms, Robert's sister declared, "Well, since we're going to be living here together, you better start serving our family properly." I was confused by what she meant, but when I looked at Robert for help, he was laughing in a way I had never seen before. It turned out his family had given up their own home and moved into my apartment without my knowledge. Sorry, apparently our family home suddenly had to be vacated, and they had nowhere to go, he explained. I wish he had told me earlier, as I had assumed it was just for a day or two, and this was really inconvenient. When I mentioned this to Robert, trying not to upset him, he looked down and apologized. Anyway, please just until they find somewhere else to go. I couldn't say no. How could I turn away people in need, especially the family of someone important to me, without even a place to go? I reluctantly agreed to live together, on the condition that they find a new place as soon as possible. But I would come to regret this decision. Robert's family showed no restraint. All four of them, from the day they moved in, did nothing and left everything to me, saying whatever they wanted. They made no effort to look for a house or a job. When I asked about their jobs, I was in for another surprise. Oh, I quit that lousy supermarket job. She had said she was employed, but apparently, it was just part-time work. I had assumed she was a full-time employee due to her age, but she revealed she hadn't had a steady job since high school. Robert's parents were also in part-time jobs and had quit before coming here. And, of course, Robert's sister was unemployed. She had said she was a student, but that was a lie. Why should I work when I've become part of a wealthy family? A wealthy family? Who was she talking about? When I asked, I got another shocking reply. You, of course. You got a big settlement and insurance money from your parents' accident, and you don't even have a mortgage on this apartment. You can live without working. Robert's sister said, laughing. I protested to Robert when he got home, but he raised his voice in a way I had never seen before. Everyone's tired from suddenly having to leave their home. Let them rest for a while. Or do you want to cruelly kick out my family, Emily? Stunned, I froze. Then Robert suddenly softened his tone. Sorry for yelling. I'm having a tough time too. I've been busy and tired today. Can you understand? Just a little more patience, please. Robert was good at handling women. Looking back, he probably always used a mix of kindness and harshness to get his way with women. But at that moment, I didn't realize it and reluctantly agreed to endure a little longer. And the tyranny of Robert's family got worse. They treated me like a servant when at home and demanded money when going out. We can't go job hunting without a penny, can we? It's fine, but if we can't find work, we'll just keep living here. I reluctantly gave them some money, which of course they claimed to have spent without finding a job. They probably never looked for work. But if I said that, they would accuse me of lying without proof, and Robert's whole family would blame me for hours. Telling Robert didn't solve the problem. Everyone's frustrated about not finding jobs. Sorry, just bear with it a little longer. I'll talk to them, Robert said, trying to smooth things over. But as time went on, I felt like saying anything was pointless. However, the frequency of them asking for money gradually decreased, perhaps because Robert said something, so the issue seemed to resolve itself. Of course, the money I had given them was never returned. Then, after about 3 months of living this way, I noticed something alarming. Why is the credit card bill so high? Could it be unauthorized use? When I quickly checked the statement, all the charges were made with family credit cards. The purchases ranged from food and drinks to books, games, and even expensive brand bags and clothes. Each item was labeled with a number from 1 to 5, indicating that 5 family credit cards had been issued. Currently, these credit cards are in my name, with Robert using the family cards. It seemed like you'd be better at handling this, and it's more convenient to consolidate payments, right? Can I leave it to you? He said, and I ended up managing them. But it seemed these family cards had been issued without my knowledge. Robert's family stopped asking for money because they could now make credit card payments and cash withdrawals. When I confronted Robert about why he made family cards for his in-laws without asking me, he laughed and said, "Well, you complain when they say they have no money, so what choice do I have? Besides, you know who took you in when you were all alone, right? Can you really say such things to the important family of your benefactor?" I was stunned into silence by his arrogant tone, unlike anything I had heard before. Was Robert always like this? If you're grateful, you should serve my family more. Then I'll acknowledge you as family too. Until then, consider it like you're on a provisional license. I had never heard of a provisional phase in marriage. Noticing my silence, Robert pressed further. This means you're not yet an official family member. If you don't like it, you can leave any time, you know? Right now, it's just the 5 of us in our family. Useless parasites, get out. That's when I realized Robert's true nature. I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body, shocked. I considered divorcing Robert. In fact, I began to wonder why I married Robert in the first place. Initially, I just thought he was a handsome guy. Like the other girls, I was just excited about him being handsome, without any particular intent. Then one time, when I left to go to the restroom, Robert approached me. You seem different from other people, Emily? Huh? I don't know how to put it, mystical? Sorry, it's not something I should say to a customer. I was taken aback. That continued, and I gradually started to notice Robert. Maybe that was his strategy to make me like him. Thinking about it calmly, it started to make sense. I remember, when Robert came to our table for small talk, a colleague jokingly said I was a wealthy heiress living alone in a condo. It was right after that he started talking to me. Probably, he was after my wealth and this condo. Robert wasn't really my type. To put it nicely, he was modern. To put it bluntly, he seemed somewhat frivolous. I liked mature men who could talk quietly and seriously, but I ended up falling for Robert. I always found that strange. Robert was the so-called handsome guy. It must have been easy for him to charm a woman, especially someone like me, not used to men and newly into the workforce. I fell for his tactics and ended up marrying him. The thought made me so frustrated and embarrassed, I felt like destroying everything in the house. But I wasn't foolish enough to act on that impulse. I decided to get revenge, somehow. For that, I needed to endure this life a little longer. Like Robert manipulated me, I would control his entire family. The condo we live in was bought by my father with a mortgage soon after I was born. It wasn't very expensive back then, but the area developed rapidly with a new shopping center nearby, and now it's considered a luxury condo. My parents, hoping for more children, bought a spacious condo. That's why there's enough room even with Robert's family moving in. But even with its decent size, having Robert's family around is a nuisance for me, working from home. I'm enduring this only for the sake of revenge. As Robert's sister said, there's no mortgage payment for this condo. When I was 3, both of my parents passed away. In a car accident. They died on their way back from my paternal grandfather's funeral, after colliding with a speeding car on the freeway. That day, I was supposed to go with them, but I had caught the flu that's going around and had a high fever. So, my maternal grandparents came to the condo where we lived with my parents to take care of me, leaving me as the only one who survived. The mortgage payments were covered by the group credit life insurance. So the only housing costs I pay are the management fees and property taxes. Robert, seeing the amount, said he would contribute just a bit more than that to our household expenses. There's no mortgage, so if I put in that much, we should manage Emily's income, right? We'll each use our own earnings for personal expenses. Sounds good, doesn't it? I agreed, thinking maybe he was right. Until then, I had been paying for everything by myself, so I thought his contribution would lighten my load. Looking back, it was foolish, but at the time, I was blinded by my love for Robert and just went along with whatever he said. Robert probably thinks he's the head of the household and the one supporting me. Which is why he can so easily call me a parasite. But in reality, it's different. I pay for most of the expenses like utilities, food, social expenses, and entertainment. And now, 5 real parasites had been added to my household, making it impossible to manage with just that amount. I wanted to get rid of them as soon as possible, but I pretended not to notice and endured. I gritted my teeth and let Robert's family freely shop, reminding myself that I'll be the one laughing in the end, to get through these tough times. Then, 3 months after deciding to divorce, the day to act finally came. I'm tired. Please decide, it's either me or your family. I told Robert, presenting him with a final decision. He was surprised, but I continued without concern. None of your family members lift a finger to help around the house, they just dump all their chores on me. You know I work from home, I'm not just playing around. Yet, they treat me like a freeloader and tell me to know my place since you're supporting me. I've had enough. I cried as I confronted Robert. He looked at me, smirked, and said, Then you should leave. Didn't I tell you before? You're not really a part of this family yet. Giving up like this means you didn't earn your place in the family. I pretended to be shocked as I looked at Robert. What are you surprised about? If you can't live with my family, then you're the one who has to leave. Oh, and since I'm not at fault, I'll take this apartment as alimony. And I'll take half of your savings as part of the property division. Ah, so that was his aim all along. That's why his whole family kept harassing me, trying to drive me out. I knew it, but hearing it outright was still a shock. It was someone I once loved and even married. But thanks to this, I made up my mind. Fine, I said, deciding to divorce Robert. But this condo is mine. And I'm not at fault either. What did you say? The reason for the divorce is you allowing your family to live with us without consulting me, and your family ignoring me. I said it firmly to Robert. He seemed shocked that I outright rejected his proposal, not expecting such a response. It made sense, as I had always complied with his demands since our marriage. Thinking back on it, it made me angry. I don't want to spend another second with you all, so I'll leave now, but you should also prepare to leave. It's a joke, right? This is our home, we won't leave. Ever heard of residential rights? You can't just force people out who live here. Robert shouted. Ignoring his ranting, I left the house and went to my grandparents' place. I explained everything and asked if I could stay until things were settled. My grandparents were shocked to learn what I had gone through and scolded me for not consulting them earlier, tears in their eyes. Grandma, Grandpa, I'm sorry for worrying you. But I'll be okay now. You know, I might look docile, but I'm not really. I said with forced laughter, tears in my eyes. The day after I left the apartment, Robert contacted me right away. Hey, what's this all about? What are you referring to? The certified mail. I was impressed by the quick work. I had left the divorce proceedings to a lawyer, and when I told them yesterday that I was leaving the house, they arranged for everything to be delivered today. I'm not paying any alimony, and I'm not leaving the condo, just so you know. Robert declared. But legally, you have an obligation to pay, and you don't have the right to continue living in that apartment, I responded. What are you talking about? That apartment is mine too, since we're married. If you insist, then pay me half its value to buy me out. Such an absurd claim. Talking like this is getting us nowhere. Please communicate through my lawyer from now on. I said, ending the call. I knew he would probably call again tomorrow, but I had no desire to talk anymore today. As expected, he called the next morning. Hey, what's this all about? He repeated the same line as yesterday. No creativity at all. What are you referring to? The card's not working, what did you do? What I did was cancel it. That card was mine, and you were just using the family card, remember? Indeed, before leaving the house, I had switched all the contracts from that card to another and canceled it. Of course, the family cards would stop working when I cancel mine. I was paying for it, too. Yes, you paid the apartment's management fee and property taxes. Just for the first 2 months. It's not much, but I can deduct that from the alimony if you like. When I mocked him like that, I heard some indistinct shouting from the other end of the phone. That's right, Robert only paid the agreed amount for just 2 months. He made various excuses about the store and whatnot, always finding a reason to ask me to wait, but then he stopped paying altogether. If he forgot and thought he was still paying, that's some poor memory. But I didn't care anymore. He's someone I'm cutting ties with, his memory doesn't matter to me. That's the situation, so please pay your half of the living expenses I've been covering. I've kept a detailed household ledger, which I'll submit as evidence. Then divide the savings properly. It's marital property, he demanded. Yes, I understand. Let's split it accordingly. I agreed, and he ended the call with a parting shot, reminding me not to forget. Hey, what's that all about? Then, a few days later, I got another call with the same line. I realized they lacked not only memory but vocabulary as well. What do you mean? The split of shared property. Why is it 0? You must be rolling in cash from your parents' insurance and alimony. Ah, so that's what they were thinking. I patiently explained that my savings before marriage weren't part of the shared property, and since we had no savings after marriage, it naturally amounted to 0. Don't lie to me. If you think I'm lying, why don't you consult with someone? Anyway, from now on, please communicate through my attorney. I won't be speaking to you directly anymore. Goodbye. I said that, hung up the phone, and blocked Robert's number. 2 months after I left the house, Robert and his family finally moved out of the apartment. Not because they had a change of heart, but because they couldn't sustain their living. Naturally, Robert's income alone wasn't enough for a family of 5. They were used to shopping extravagantly with my card, telling them to cut back now was impossible. I had let them use the card intentionally for this. Knowing them, I was sure it would come to this. His family started pestering Robert for shopping money, and when he refused, they began stealing from his wallet. Even when Robert got mad, they blamed him for kicking me out. To top it off, the electricity, gas, and water were all shut off. Of course, I had arranged for that, since I had no plans to live there for a while. Robert tried to get them restored immediately over the phone, but the house was in my name. No one else could get them reconnected if the owner had them stopped. During the hot summer and early fall, his family couldn't bear the extreme heat and eventually left the condo. Where they went, I neither know nor care. Robert tried to stay till the end, but eventually gave up due to the lack of electricity and the inability to bathe. The divorce proceedings went faster than expected. Not because Robert had a change of heart, but because he messed up. He cheated on me while we were still married. Or rather, he had started making moves on someone thinking he could kick me out soon. He bragged about owning a luxury apartment in a prime location downtown, luring young girls there. It's surprising he did this while his family was around, but he had a history of such behavior, so they didn't mind. He was handsome, so I suspected he might do such things. Before leaving, I had installed cameras in several places in the house, which captured all the evidence. Maybe he underestimated me, but he really did disrespect me. He brought his family into my home without my permission, made a family card and left me the bill, kicked me out, and cheated on me. I demanded a hefty sum in alimony for all these. When Robert saw the amount, he turned pale and desperately pleaded for reconciliation, but I had no such intentions. Knowing he couldn't pay, I made him borrow as much as possible from his company and took whatever I could get. When I threatened to sue him for fraud over the family card, he reluctantly agreed to my terms. Well, I hope he does his best to pay off his debt. The divorce is finalized, and I'm still staying at my grandparents' place. I haven't decided what to do with the apartment yet. I might sell it. I treasured it because my parents left it to me, but since they passed away when I was very young and I have no memories of them, plus all this has happened, I think they'd understand if I let it go. My work as an illustrator is picking up. I might live alone again, but it's a good time for that. I can work just fine staying at my grandparents'. I'll depend on them a little longer, then move forward with strength. Next time, I won't be fooled by a man who's only good-looking. I hope to find a partner I can share my life with. Emily is beautiful and smart. She is our only daughter. We don't need a failed, ugly thing like you. Saying that, my parents, with my sister in tow, left our house, leaving behind me, just 14 years old at the time. Being explicitly told I was unwanted, tears overflowed. Always compared to my sister and deprived of love, as a child, I had no choice but to cling desperately to my parents to survive. But never did I imagine they would leave me behind and walk out. What was I to do now? Then, I remembered my grandfather, who doted on my sister and me when we were younger.
Grandpa! I was abandoned because I'm ugly. Help me!
What are you talking about? Don't worry. Samantha, you're not ugly. Just you wait and see. Fast forward 6 years, and just as my grandfather said, I transformed so much that even my parents were shocked. I became the top model. And then, unbelievably, my parents started asking me for money. But I didn't cave in. I'm not the timid child I used to be. Because now, I have strong and important allies on my side. My name is Samantha. I just turned 20 this year. I have an older sister, Emily, who's 3 years my senior. I think we were close when we were younger. We wore matching clothes, walked hand in hand, and never really fought, always playing together as close sisters. Emily had a beautiful face, with fair skin, large double eyelids, and a straight nose. In contrast, I had a very ordinary, plain face. Moreover, while she was petite, I was tall. We were two completely different people. As she grew up, Emily became somewhat of a local celebrity, known for her beauty among neighbors and schoolmates. When she was 12, our parents, proud of their beautiful daughter, entered her into the national beauty contest, just out of curiosity. She didn't win the grand prize, but was awarded the runner-up. It was not Emily, but our parents who were over the moon.
Wow, amazing, Emily. You could become a supermodel. Or maybe an actress. Thanks to Emily, we'll be rich, they exclaimed joyously.
Of course, when Emily became the runner-up, I too jumped for joy with her.
Big sis, you're amazing. Anyone can see how cute you are. I'm so proud of you. Thank you. Samantha, you're cute too. You're tall, you'd be more suited to modeling, she complimented me.
I was truly happy to be praised by my sister. Emily then slowly started modeling. She wasn't in high demand immediately, but as a kid model, she got called for a few magazine shoots. As these days went by, my parents began to neglect me. Until then, I thought they were normal parents. They seemed to care for us both equally. But their attitude changed drastically after the beauty contest. I was aware of this change, even as a child. At mealtimes, delicious food was laid out in front of Emily's seat. In addition, Mom would calculate calories to ensure she didn't gain weight, planning a diet with her health in mind. But all I got was ramen noodles. Even during dining out or vacations, they would only take Emily, leaving me behind. Can you believe it? This situation, I mean. Back then, I was just a grade schooler. My mom always dressed in designer brands, and my dad drove a fancy imported car. Yet, in front of me, they'd say, "We don't have money for your food," or "We can't afford to take you on trips." They said, "Emily is going to be an actress or a model and take care of us in the future. We want to feed her well and make lots of family memories on trips now. But you, Samantha, you're just gonna be an average Joe. It's a waste to spend money on you." But leaving a young daughter alone at home to go on a trip would be a huge issue if it got out. Not wanting my parents to get caught, they usually limited their trips to 1 or 2 nights, leaving me with some instant ramen and money for food. They never bought me clothes either. I always wore Emily's hand-me-downs. They always bought cute clothes for Emily. Emily, concerned for me, once said, "This dress looks better on you, Samantha, so I'll give it to you." It was a really cute dress, and I was over the moon. But when my dad found out I got the dress from Emily, he was furious.
"Why are you wearing that dress? Did you steal it from your sister?" "Dad, no. I gave it to her."
Emily quickly covered for me, but Dad's anger didn't subside. "That dress only suits Emily. It's a pity to see you wearing it. Give it back right now," he demanded. Suddenly being yelled at, I, still quite young, was terrified. But Emily stood up for me, saying, "I love Samantha. Don't talk to her like that."
Okay, sorry, Emily dear, don't be mad.
Dad said, apologizing only to Emily, never to me. Emily looked at Dad with contempt, but he seemed oblivious to it. After that incident, Emily tried to interact with me as little as possible in front of our parents. Maybe she felt responsible for getting me yelled at for giving me the dress. But despite such harsh discrimination in my childhood, I had happy moments. Dad was always late coming home from work, but Mom was a stay-at-home mom, always around. So, after my parents had gone to bed, Emily would sneak into my room at night. We'd chat and hang out, just like old times. Those moments with my favorite sister were precious to me. But then, there were times I'd call hellish. That was when Emily had piano lessons. Dad once said, if she's beautiful and can play piano, she'll be unbeatable, and made her take piano lessons. As for me, I knew they wouldn't bother with lessons for me, so I never asked. Of course, my parents weren't interested in me and never suggested anything. So, when Emily went to her weekly piano lessons, it was just Mom and me at home. Without Emily to protect me, Mom's attitude towards me got even worse. One day, she said, Emily is so cute, but you, Samantha, you just have such an average face.
Huh?
I was so frustrated and sad I couldn't stand it.
Stop comparing me to Emily, please.
Gathering all my courage, I tried to stand up to my mom for the first time. Tears spilled from my eyes without me even realizing it. Seeing me like that, my mom laughed.
What's with that face? You look even uglier when you cry. Who on earth did you take after?
I mean, I am unmistakably the child of my parents, taking after both equally. If anything, it's Emily who doesn't resemble our parents at all, looking nothing like them due to some kind of throwback gene. She's too beautiful. Yet, my parents dote on my beautiful sister, who doesn't resemble them, rather than me, who does. I mustered all my courage to speak up, but their words shattered my heart instantly. After that, I never talked back to my dad or mom again. Months passed in this way. Emily's going to be a high schooler starting in the fall. Being smart, Emily was going to attend a prestigious public school. I wanted to go to the same high school as my amazing sister, but it was a high hurdle. Still, I studied hard. But my mom's words easily shattered my efforts.
We're moving to New York soon.
I was confused, thinking it was just another trip. But she said, just so you know, we're not coming back. This house will be handed over to someone else in a week.
Wait, are we moving? That's right. Emily got scouted by an agent from a famous agency in New York. She'll get to take lessons to polish her acting and expression skills. Then she'll have a chance to audition for dramas and stuff.
Mom's eyes sparkled as she spoke.
But since it's an agency in New York, she's giving up the high school she was going to attend here and will go to a school in New York instead. Wow, that's amazing, Emily. Then I guess I need to rethink where I'm going to.
Thinking about the high school I'd been working hard to get into and realizing I couldn't go there anymore, I felt a bit down. But then, what my dad said next was unbelievable.
Huh? What are you talking about? You're staying here. So no need to change your plans for further education. Well, that's if we could even afford to send someone like you to school. What? What do you mean? Aren't we losing this house? Aren't you, Emily, Mom, and Dad all leaving for New York? And what do you mean by affording my education? We're not taking you to New York, and we have no intention of paying for you to go to high school. That's what we're saying.
I was confused and couldn't comprehend their words.
Wait, so how am I supposed to live from now on? What do I know? You're old enough to figure something out on your own.
I was shocked that my dad, at my mere 14 years of age, expected me to fend for myself.
But I can't live alone. I can't even go to school. Why is it always Emily who gets everything?
I shouted these obvious truths at my parents, hoping they would understand. But, as usual, my mom just laughed at me.
Emily will definitely succeed, so if we think of it as an investment for her future, we don't mind spending a lot of money. But you? What do you have? You're just an ordinary person. Do you think someone like you will succeed? Of course not. It's a waste to spend money on you.
Stunned by my mom's words, I couldn't hold back my tears. Then my dad added, Emily is the only daughter we're proud of, smart and beautiful. We don't need a failed, ugly thing like you. No matter how unloved or discriminated against, I loved my parents. After all, they were my only mom and dad in this world. I wanted to be loved and tried hard. I thought if I could at least be smart or good at sports, maybe they would care. I wished to be a normal family again like in the past, holding on to hope even as I nearly gave up many times. But being clearly told I was unwanted, I realized my wishes would never come true, and tears filled my eyes. Seeing me crying, my father said,
Even if Emily wants to take you to New York, we will never take you with us. If she asks you to come along, you must refuse, got it? But, you want to get in the way of your sister who's finally starting to succeed? If you insist on going to New York with her, we won't have the money for her future. Are you okay with that? Ruining your sister's future.
It was an awful thing to say. My father had the audacity to start saying that if I went along, I would ruin Emily's future. Now that I'm older, I know that's not true. It wasn't my fault. I might have been able to say that. But back then, I was too young to stand up to my father's words. Emily wasn't there that day. With her modeling jobs, piano lessons, and cram school for exams, she was increasingly away from home. The terrible words from my parents were spoken when she was absent. I was in despair. Then, a week later, the day came when my father, mother, and Emily were leaving for New York. Emily had always thought, of course, I would go with them. But as I made no preparations to leave the house, Emily asked, Is something wrong? Then my mom announced, Samantha isn't coming to New York with us. What? Why? Emily was shocked and wide-eyed.
Because she doesn't want to leave her friends. But well, of course, she wouldn't want to, she's graduating in a year and wouldn't want to transfer schools now.
In front of me, my mother blatantly lied.
Samantha, is that true?
I wanted to say, no. I want to go with you. But my father glared at me like a demon, and I was too scared to speak. After a while of silence, my father hurried us, Come on. It's almost time for the train. While I stayed silent, I thought about whether I should say I wanted to come. But my heart had already reached its limit. Living every day being compared to my sister was unbearable. The thought of those days continuing was too much. And I didn't want to get in the way of my beloved sister, no matter what. I made up my mind.
Yeah. I don't want to leave my friends. But how will you live by yourself, Samantha?
Emily looked at me with concern. Then my father said, It's okay. Your aunt and uncle said they would take care of Samantha. They'll come to pick her up soon. No need to worry, Emily. I had never heard such a thing. I doubted whether my father had even contacted my aunt and uncle. Emily gently offered several times, Shall we go together? If you're not going, I'll stay here, and we can live together. But I shook my head. Staying with her would only hinder her future. I thought. In the end, Emily was forcibly taken out of the house by our mother. I was left behind, clinging to the faint hope in my father's words that my aunt and uncle will come to pick me up, waiting alone for hours in the cold, dim room. But, as expected, they never came. It was probably just a lie my father made up on the spot.
What am I even doing? What should I do now?
I couldn't believe I had still trusted the words of such a terrible father. I despised myself. My father and mother left, taking only my beautiful sister with them. What should I do now? Lost in thought, I suddenly remembered my grandparents who had always been so kind to Emily and me when we were younger. Desperately searching the empty house, I finally found my grandfather's contact information. I remembered how we used to visit our grandparents' rural home every year when our family was still normal. However, once our family turned abnormal, my parents lost interest in both my grandparents and me, leading to estrangement. Calling this number was a gamble. I wasn't sure if it would still connect me to my grandfather or if he would be willing to help. With trembling hands, I dialed the number written on the note. I didn't have a cell phone, so I had to go to a nearby payphone. My heart started pounding wildly. Ring, ring, ring.
Hello?
He answered. At the sound of my grandfather's voice, I burst into tears and cried out.
Grandpa! Help me! What's the matter? Is that you, Samantha? Emily? It's Samantha. Dad and Mom abandoned me because they said I'm ugly. They're living in New York with Emily. What should I do?
I pleaded with my grandfather in a trembling voice. Then he said, I'm coming right now. Just wait for me at home. I started walking back home, waiting for my grandfather. The fear of being betrayed again, the fear that he might not come, was unbearable. But a few hours later, my grandfather really did come. And my grandmother was with him. They both looked quite disheveled, as if they had rushed over. Seeing me alone in the empty house with just a few belongings, my grandfather was furious. I'm unwanted. They said they don't need an ugly daughter like me. I couldn't help but cry again as I spoke. Then my grandfather hugged me tightly.
Don't worry. How about living with us from now on? And you're not ugly, Samantha.
You're such a beautiful girl, my grandmother added. You have a model-like figure. Be confident.
You'll see. Samantha will become a wonderful woman that everyone will admire.
They held me until I calmed down. After that, I lived with my grandparents. When we got home, my grandfather immediately called my father, but he didn't answer despite numerous attempts. After about 10 tries, it seemed like my grandfather finally got through, but after the call, he was furious, saying, I don't want anything to do with such a heartless man. I didn't know what they talked about, but I could guess it was probably about how they didn't need me or how important Emily was to them. But having my grandfather stand up for me brought some peace to my heart. No one had ever defended me against my parents before, and maybe that's why it felt so good. I had to transfer schools and couldn't attend the high school I wanted to, but living in a warm home where I was greeted with smiles and hot meals every day was blissful. Though I sometimes thought of Emily and my parents, I never felt lonely, thanks to my grandparents' loving care. 6 years passed. And I celebrated my 20th birthday as an adult. I was living away from my grandparents due to work. Today, on my rare day off, I decided to visit my beloved grandparents. They were thrilled to see me, saying, We've missed you. You've become so impressive. As we were catching up, the doorbell rang, and my grandfather went to answer it. Moments later, I heard him shout, Get out of here right now. Wondering what was happening, my grandmother and I headed to the entrance, and there, to my shock, were my parents.
Dad, Mom. Ah, there you are. You've grown up so much. You've become such a beauty. Wow, we're surprised.
They looked at me with smirks on their faces. The last time I saw them, they had been quite different. My father, who had been somewhat chubby, was now gaunt with sunken cheeks. My mother, once always decked out in brand-name clothes and perfect makeup, was wearing shabby clothes, with no makeup and disheveled hair.
What happened to you two? You've changed a lot. You've changed too. You used to be so ugly. And now you're all over TV. You must be rich, right? Give us some money. That's why we came today. That's right. Now you're even going abroad for shoots. Give us our share, please.
Yes, I was now working as a model. Ever since I was little, I was tall for my age. By the time I was in elementary school, I already stood at about 5 feet 4 inches. After my parents abandoned me, I started living with my grandparents. Thanks to their nutritious meals, I grew to about 5 feet 9 inches. Back then, I thought girls should be petite to be cute, so I felt complexed and disliked my increasing height. Then, one day, during a trip to New York with my friends, a stranger approached me.
Hey, you. You've got an amazing style. You could definitely make it in showbiz. Would you like to become a model at my agency? She said.
At first, I thought she was suspicious, but her business card showed she was from a well-known major agency. I was thunderstruck at being scouted. When I got home and told my grandparents, they were thrilled.
Didn't Grandpa tell you? Samantha, you're beautiful and have a great figure. You're Grandpa's pride and joy.
And so, I left my grandparents to live in New York. Though it was sad to leave them, I worked hard, eager to show my beloved grandparents how well I was doing. My efforts paid off, and I became a sought-after model on TV. When my parents saw me on TV and realized I was successful, they came asking for money.
Are you kidding me? Is that all you have to say to your daughter after 6 years?
Grandpa scolded them before I could. But my dad wouldn't back down.
Emily's gone. She said she was leaving for a role in an overseas drama and hasn't been back for 2 years. We've tried contacting her numerous times, but no reply. And now, we've run through all the savings Emily made.
Hearing this, I burst out laughing.
So you finally spent all my sister's savings.
What are you laughing at? My dad snapped.
Because Emily is right here. Long time no see, Mom, Dad.
With that, Emily emerged from the back of the house.
Why are you here?
6 years ago. When our parents took Emily and left. She worried about me constantly. Later, recalling the kindness of our grandparents, she wondered if I might turn to them for help and called Grandpa. Hearing her voice again made me so happy I cried. From then on, Emily and I kept in touch regularly, meeting secretly so our parents wouldn't find out. I was so happy we could be close sisters again. Emily, as it turned out, wanted to be a piano teacher rather than continue in entertainment. But our parents refused, saying, "You'll make more money as a celebrity." When Dad earlier said they had spent all of Emily's savings, it turned out that despite her hard work in the entertainment industry, most of her earnings were taken by our parents, leaving her little for herself. They quit their jobs, relying entirely on Emily's income, and led a degraded life. To them, Emily was just a cash cow. I used to be so envious of Emily, thinking she had everything from our parents. But I didn't see the struggles she faced, the pain of being their puppet. She didn't want to live controlled by them. She wanted to follow her own dreams. After discussing with Grandpa, Emily had moved in with them 2 years ago. So, she had been there all along. Seeing Emily, our parents were as shocked as if they'd seen a ghost.
You want Samantha's money? We'll never let that happen. What are you talking about? Weren't you abroad? That was just a lie, an excuse to get away from you two. Now it's our turn to leave you. That's right. But how are we supposed to live without money? You're adults, you can fend for yourselves. Just like you told me.
I threw back the exact words my parents once said to me, right back at them.
What? We don't need selfish parents like you. We have our loving grandparents, so please leave.
Saying that, Emily and I forcibly kicked our parents out of the house. We looked at each other and laughed. After that, our parents tried to contact our grandparents many times, but they never responded. I don't know how Mom and Dad are living now. To us, they're just strangers, and we don't care. A year has passed since Emily and I turned our parents away. Emily became a piano teacher. She's fulfilling her dream, teaching piano to adorable kids. I've advanced even further in my career and will be walking the runway in an international fashion show next year. I've promised to invite my grandparents and Emily to the show. At my grandparents' house, there are lots of magazine cutouts and photo albums featuring me. Emily, my biggest fan, seems to collect every magazine I'm in. She even attends my autograph sessions.
Ah, you came again? It costs money and it's far. I'll sign for you when I come home. I say, but she insists, it's okay. You are so busy, I want to see you at these events.
For my kind and adorable sister and beloved grandparents, I want to keep shining as a successful model. Please let me stay just for today. Mom said I'm not family because I have a developmental disorder. These unbelievable words came from my granddaughter's mouth. Today is her birthday. She should be happily eating cake with her family, yet she's forced to say such things. I hugged her small body tightly. My name is June. I'm 58 years old. My husband, also 58, is nearing retirement from his office job. I quit my job at 55, and now I'm a stay-at-home wife. I spend my days gardening, reading comics I've loved since childhood, and watching movies. I've had my fair share of experiences when I was younger, but now they all seem like good memories. I have a son who's married and lives in a nearby apartment with his wife and 2 daughters. The elder granddaughter is 8, and the younger is 6. Having raised only one son, being around 2 girls feels new to me. My daughter-in-law, Nancy, is a cheerful person, and I think our mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship is pretty good. Nancy often leaves her 2 daughters with me since I quit my job.
Sorry, June. I have a lunch date with my mom friends today. Could you watch the girls? A high school friend is visiting from the countryside. I'm going shopping.
The reasons vary, but she frequently leaves the girls with me to go out. I've never refused because I enjoy spending time with my granddaughters. Nancy is a stay-at-home mom. My son is 35 and a department manager at a fairly large company. He must be earning a decent salary. Some of my old friends say, lucky her, leaving her kids with her mother-in-law and going out all the time as a stay-at-home mom, but I don't know if once every 10 days is often or not. That day, Nancy brought her 2 daughters over. The elder is called Amy, and the younger, Lily. Lily, resembling her mother, is a bright child. When she sees me, she always shouts, "Yeah, Grandma," and hugs around my waist. In contrast, Amy, the elder, silently nods her head so slightly you might not even notice.
That girl is so unfriendly,
Nancy often says, lightly flicking her daughter's head, which is a routine. It's not like she never greets, I don't think she needs to be flicked. Sorry, June. There's a concert by an artist I've always liked today. I might come back a bit late, Nancy says, dressed up more than usual.
Oh, that's why you're dressed up today. All right, go and enjoy yourself.
My old friends would probably say, lucky her, going to a concert while leaving her kids with her mother-in-law. Well, shall we make some pancakes? I'll help. I want mine with whipped cream. Lily says, eagerly cute. Ignoring her sister, Amy then says, Grandma, can I read comics?
Of course. I'll call you when the pancakes are ready.
Nancy might call her unfriendly, but I don't mind Amy's independent nature. It's probably because I'm the same type. When I stopped working and Nancy started leaving the girls with me, they often played with drawing. Despite being 2 years apart, Amy was astonishingly good at drawing. Having always liked comics, I consider myself to have a decent eye for art. And I was even impressed by her skill. Her drawings weren't the typical doll-like illustrations most girls make. She drew characters with a real sense of dimension. Wow, Amy, you're really good at drawing. I couldn't help but praise her enthusiastically.
But Daddy and Mommy said her drawings aren't cute,
said Lily, who had just turned 5. Probably feeling jealous because I praised her sister so much. Her drawings were typical for her age, big-eyed doll-like figures, which were cute in their own way. I felt sorry for Amy, given her parents' lack of artistic appreciation.
Amy, you're incredibly talented. Grandma's amazed. You know, your dad was never good at drawing or crafts even as a kid. He just can't see how wonderful your drawings are.
Amy smiled shyly at my words. She rarely showed her emotions, which made her smile all the more precious. Maybe her drawings are too sophisticated for her age, which might be why her parents don't find them cute, but I couldn't understand why they wouldn't praise her. When Lily fell asleep, I asked Amy if she wanted to read comics. I haven't read many comics, she replied. I've always loved comics and have a large collection at home. My son wasn't much into comics as a child, and I've never heard that Nancy liked them either. Naturally, they wouldn't have bought many for their kids. I took Amy to the room with the bookshelves.
Feel free to read anything you like. Grandma will make lunch in the meantime.
While I prepared noodles for lunch, Amy stayed in the room without making a sound. Even when I called her for lunch, there was no response. When I went to fetch her, she was engrossed in reading a comic. During lunch, she talked about the comic. It was surprising since she's usually not very talkative. Even Lily remarked, "Sis is talking a lot." That's weird. It must have been a rare occasion.
I'm not great with books full of text, but comics are really fun and interesting.
Hearing her say that made me, a comic lover, very happy. After lunch, Amy continued reading comics until dinner. Since that day, whenever Amy comes over, she heads straight to the bookshelf and spends her time reading comics alone. I was happy to see her interest in comics, but then I was surprised when Lily said, "Sis is boring, always reading comics." She even bought a comic with her allowance and got in trouble with Mom. I think it's fine for her to buy comics with her allowance. I remember how hard it was to have my interests dismissed by my parents as a child. I'm definitely on Amy's side. One day, Nancy asked me to make a rice snack for Lily's birthday party. I bought a cute stationery set online for her gift and prepared the rice snacks before heading to my son and Nancy's house. Amy laid out her new sparkly stationery set on the empty space of the table. With a delighted expression, she exclaimed to her sister, "Isn't it great? This is mine, so you can't use it, Lily." Her childlike excitement was palpable. I regretted not buying something for Amy as well. "I hope you're looking forward to your birthday present too, Amy," I said, trying to make her feel included. But Nancy's cold response took me by surprise. "I don't think we'll be having a party for Amy." I was surprised by Nancy's cold manner of speaking. Amy isn't really into parties. She's quiet even today, isn't she? Indeed, Amy was a quiet and reserved child, but I wondered if any child would really dislike being celebrated. It's not exciting to give her presents, she doesn't show much joy.
That's not something you should say. Some kids are just not good at expressing their feelings.
I defended Amy, feeling a connection with her since I, too, had often been misunderstood due to my own reserved nature. Even my son chimed in.
But Amy doesn't have much charm or grace for a girl, it's a bit concerning.
His words, though not ill-intended, could be quite hurtful to a child. Amy, with her inscrutable expression, just continued to pick at her French fries, seemingly unaffected. About a month later, during the summer break, Nancy arrived with Amy in tow.
"June, I hate to ask, but could you look after Amy for a couple of days?"
"What's going on?" I asked, surprised by the sudden request.
"I'm heading back to my parents' house, but if Amy is there, my mom will have a lot to say." "Like what?" "Just what my husband said the other day. That Amy lacks charm and grace for a girl, and then it's all about how I'm not raising her right." "That's awful."
I sympathized, knowing Amy wouldn't want to be in such an environment. So, I agreed to take care of her. "Okay, you can say her grandparents wanted to take Amy on a trip," I suggested, making the best of the situation. Amy, treated like an inconvenience right in front of her, remained expressionless, giving nothing away.
"Grandma, are we going on a trip?"
Amy asked after her mother had left.
"Oh, no. That was just a fib. Sorry, okay? Would you like to go on a trip?"
"No. I'd rather read comics at your house."
"Does your mom hate comics?"
I recalled something Lily had mentioned before.
"I don't know. But she says reading comics makes you dumb."
I was surprised that such an old-fashioned view still existed, especially coming from my daughter-in-law. Nevertheless, Amy and I spent a pleasant 2 days together. She was engrossed in her comics most of the time, but I enjoyed hearing her thoughts on them. Some were perhaps a bit mature for a girl her age, but I didn't object, remembering how much I hated being restricted as a child. During dinner, Amy was so caught up in talking about the comics that she almost forgot to eat. My husband, a bit sunburned from golfing, watched Amy and chuckled, "She's just like you." Normally not much of a talker, but when it comes to her favorite things, she doesn't care if anyone's listening or not. Just like you. Well, they are grandmother and granddaughter, so it's not weird they're alike. When Nancy came to pick her up, Amy seemed like she didn't want to leave. It was both pleasing and a bit sad for me.
"Feel free to come over anytime,"
I said, and she smiled broadly and nodded. "What's with you? You're all smiles for Grandma. I thought to myself, she could have chosen a nicer way to say that. Right after she said that, Amy's expression went blank. For Amy's birthday, though we weren't having a party, I wanted to give her a present. So, I went to the town center and bought her a sketchbook and a set of 120 colored pencils, all wrapped up as a gift. I also bought Lily a character-themed notebook and a set of colored pencils. Today being a weekday, the kids were probably still at school, so I thought I'd go home and make some more sushi rolls. Walking home from the bus, I saw a small figure in my garden. Sometimes kids from the neighborhood pick flowers from my flower beds. They say flower picking isn't really a crime, but as someone who takes care of them, I can't just overlook it. As I hurried home, I found Amy standing alone in the garden. Amy, what's up? Are you here alone? I asked, surprised. She replied in a small voice, can I stay here tonight, just for today? Sure, but what about your mom? Did you come here alone? Mom said I'm not family because I have a developmental disorder. What do you mean? I've heard the term developmental disorder quite often recently. At the doctor's, they said I have a developmental disorder. Mom said she doesn't need a child like that. Oh my, that's terrible. Let's go inside the house, I said, taking her hand. Honestly, I didn't really understand what a developmental disorder was. Was it some kind of abnormality? She didn't seem like it. I looked it up on my smartphone and learned that developmental disorders include ADHD, autism, and learning disabilities. ADHD involves restlessness, lack of attention, and concentration. Autism means difficulties in communication, lack of interest in others, limited facial expressions, and preferring solitary play. Amy might fall into this category. In learning disabilities, there's no issue with intelligence, but there can be difficulties in reading. It's apparently caused by a variance in brain development from birth. The more I read, the more I remembered kids in my class who might have had such conditions. Kids who couldn't sit still during class, or who wouldn't talk to anyone. Maybe they'd be diagnosed with developmental disorders today. Even I wasn't great at communication and preferred playing alone. That quiet kid from my childhood became a chatty and cheerful mother of 3 when we met at a reunion. Maybe these are just personality traits? It's hard to say since so much about the brain is still unknown. There's also a gray area where a child may not be diagnosed with a developmental disorder but still shows tendencies. It all seemed very complicated. The real problem is when a child is diagnosed and the parents can't accept it. That's the case with Amy. But to say a child isn't family just because they're diagnosed with a developmental disorder? That's unthinkable. I took out a cookie tin and poured some milk, saying, I'm gonna make a quick call, and moved to a room where Amy couldn't hear me. Ah, she went to your place, huh? Well, that makes sense. She doesn't really have anywhere else to go, Nancy said over the phone, not sounding worried at all. What do you mean by that? Amy's telling me you said kids with developmental disorders aren't part of the family. I was pretty angry. I never said that. I just said I didn't want a child with a developmental disorder in my family. Isn't that basically the same thing? Don't you think saying that would hurt the child? I said it as a joke. But then she just takes it seriously and leaves. She's always like this. She never gets jokes, and it's exhausting being with her. I think that might be characteristic of the autism type of developmental disorder. The school teacher said she wasn't doing well in class, so they suggested getting her diagnosed for a developmental disorder. I couldn't believe it, but when we did, she was diagnosed. I was shaken up, and then she comes up saying it's her birthday today. Like I could care about that right now. I couldn't help but feel a bit of sympathy, but if it's a brain function issue from birth, it's not her fault. So you're saying it's my fault? Oh, I get it. My mother probably blames me for having a child with a disability. Nancy got so worked up over her own words that I couldn't handle her. For now, I'll take care of Amy here. She can go to school from here, and you should take some time to calm down and rest. I hung up after saying that. I informed my husband about the situation over the phone, which was basically a fait accompli. Amy's gonna be living with us for a while, with Grandma and Grandpa, I told her. Even when I said that, Amy didn't seem sad or angry, her expression was hard to read. Is it because my brain's messed up? She asked, startling me.
You're not messed up at all, Amy. You're a cute girl who loves comics and is good at drawing.
That's a lie, right? Mom always says I'm not cute. She says I'm dumb for believing everything I'm told. Shouldn't I believe what I'm told? Why do people say things you're not supposed to believe?
It's not a lie.
I realized this child was deeply hurt, even though she didn't cry. Feeling this way, I hugged my granddaughter. I think Mom prefers Lily. Dad might miss me a little, but I like it better here. There are lots of comics. It's sad to hear a child say such things.
Then let's live here together. You can read as many comics as you like, but you have to go to school and study too, okay?
When I said that, Amy asked, "Really?" and smiled happily. My husband brought home a cake for Amy's birthday after work. He knew more about developmental disorders than I did, having discussed it at his company. He said, there's a right place for everyone, and when they're in the right job, they can really excel.
It's not a disease, so it won't go away, but with understanding from others and effort from the person, life can be much easier.
He explained. That night, my son came over with school supplies and textbooks for Amy. He had researched developmental disorders and accepted that his daughter was diagnosed with one. He thought it was better for her to live with me, her grandmother, for now.
I'm sorry, Amy. I'll come get you when things settle down,
he said, patting her head. But he never came to get Amy. 3 months after Amy started living with us, Nancy's affair came to light. She had left Lily at home alone that day and went out. Lily nearly choked on a candy while home alone, but my son, who came home early from work, found her. Fortunately, he was nearby and got home earlier than usual. They called an ambulance, and she was taken to the hospital, where she was okay, but they couldn't get a hold of Nancy. I rushed to the hospital with Amy after getting the call. We were relieved to find Lily safe when Nancy showed up, looking pale.
Where were you, leaving Lily alone like that? I was having dinner with some mom friends.
But it didn't seem likely that dinner with other moms would take all evening. Of course, my son questioned that.
I just got caught up in conversation.
I wished she had left the kids with me if it was going to be like this. Maybe Nancy was hesitant to show her face because of what happened with Amy. Suddenly, Amy blurted out. Mom, why do you smell different when you go out? Not like our home shampoo or soap.
Huh, what?
Everyone was momentarily confused by her question.
What are you talking about, Amy? You never get the atmosphere, do you?
Nancy was clearly flustered.
I was at the health spa. Maybe that's why. If it was the spa, why didn't you take Lily too?
It's not just today. It's always like this, Amy said, and my son was the first to catch on. Maybe he had some suspicions.
You're cheating, aren't you? What? How can you say that? That's impossible. Don't take what Amy says seriously.
That's when I remembered something about developmental disorders.
Come to think of it, people with developmental disorders can be sensitive to sounds and smells. They can really dislike unfamiliar scents,
I mentioned, and the atmosphere turned icy.
Not just Amy, but you too, June. You don't get the atmosphere. It's not my fault. My husband is all about his work, leaving everything about the house and kids to me. I get stressed too. And now, being told my child has a developmental disorder, think about me for once.
Nancy yelled back defensively.
Amy had developmental issues even before you started leaving them with me and going out frequently.
I wondered what this daughter-in-law was talking about.
So, you were cheating while leaving your daughters with June. I'm not saying I'm blameless, but that's no excuse for your affair.
Realizing there was no escape, Nancy burst into tears and got scolded by a nurse for causing a commotion in the hospital. I never suspected a thing. Never thought my daughter-in-law would leave her kids with me to meet other men. Was I unwittingly aiding her affair? Turns out, the other man was a high school classmate she reconnected with at a reunion. He ran a bar and had time during the day, so they met at hotels then. Nancy was berated by her own mother for cheating and risking losing her kids in a divorce, and she wasn't allowed to return home. Now, she's working a night job that includes lodging. After the divorce, my son and his 2 daughters moved in with us. For a while, my son was down, but with my encouragement that he had a responsibility to raise his daughters, he started to look forward. Lily, still young, missed her mother and went to meet her, but Amy never once expressed a desire to see her mother. Gradually, the visits decreased, and Lily stopped talking about her mother. My son shared about the last visit. She's got a new guy, probably no good. She was really thin, with bruises on her face. It's hard to see a woman you once loved and had kids with fall apart like that. He said that, looking downcast. Amy, speaking with a mature tone, said,
Mom is not a child, so you don't need to carry her life either.
5 years after the divorce. Amy was 14, and Lily was 12.
I shouldn't say this, but I'm glad my parents divorced and we got to live here. This feels like my real family,
Amy said, having become much more talkative and able to express her feelings. People with developmental disorders can struggle with imagination and reading social cues. It's hard for them to picture things from text, making reading novels difficult.
It's thanks to Grandma letting me read lots of comics. Comics have dialogue and expressions that make sense together, and they explain things well.
She laughed. Living with her, I was amazed to find how smart Amy was. Good memory is common in people with autism-type developmental disorders. She's intelligent and good at studying, but maybe her difficulty in understanding others' feelings makes her easily misunderstood. My husband says, I bet Amy will grow up to be a doctor or a lawyer. But Amy herself says, I want to be a cartoonist. Can I make it? Indeed, your drawings are so good, you might just do it. I'd be thrilled if my granddaughter became a cartoonist. When you search for famous people with developmental disorders, you find quite a list. Of course, their success isn't because of their disorders. It's their own effort and support from others that matter. Still, seeing successful people with such challenges, I hope it helps reduce some of the weird discrimination and prejudice. Wouldn't it be nice if everyone had an instruction manual? Amy sure has a way with words. Whether you have a developmental disorder or not, everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. Compatibility matters too, and knowing these things in advance would make life easier for many. Recently, Amy drew a family portrait for us. It was so wonderfully done that I was moved to buy a frame and hang it in the living room. Amy was shy, but seemed happy about it. Seeing this, my husband chuckled and said, maybe she could become a painter. His pride in his granddaughter knows no bounds. And I'm just as smitten. We don't know what the future holds for our granddaughters, but we want to support them in any way we can. Ever since my mother passed, whenever I'm alone at home, my mother-in-law and Mary make it a habit to drop by unannounced. We're here visiting you, and you can't even offer a little hospitality? We'll just have to order steaks delivery again, and you're gonna pay for it. Mary giggles at her side. It's been 2 years of this hellish routine. Now, both my son and daughter have left home to attend college in the city. However, on a day when it was just my husband and me, Daniel said something unbelievable.
My folks and my sister's family are moving in next week, so clear out your room.
And then he told me I was in the way and to get out. This house, which was originally my family home, and now being told to leave it, that's something I cannot forgive. Faced with this, I didn't hesitate to decide on a course of action. Fine, I'll just clear the house out entirely, I said. Daniel smirked maliciously, thinking he'd won. He didn't know what was coming. He went off on a business trip. And I immediately called to begin the process I had planned. I got everything arranged before Daniel came back, and then I left the house. I can just imagine the look on Daniel's face when he returns. My name is Sofia Garcia. I'm a 48-year-old housewife living in my childhood home since getting married. After graduating from high school, I went to college and found a job in New York, where I spent all of my single years. However, during a trip back home to Nebraska, I ended up attending a local matchmaking party. I had no intention of moving back to Nebraska, but I was coerced into going by the people around me. I'm the type who can't say no when asked. So I went, and the local men, not often blessed with such opportunities, were quite eager, to put it mildly. It was like everyone was looking around with greedy eyes, desperately grabbing at any opportunity they could find. Overwhelmed by the atmosphere, I decided to just bide my time until it was appropriate to leave. Next to me, there was a man sitting quietly by himself. That was Daniel Garcia, the man who would become my husband. Since I was bored being on my own, I shared some food with him. Then, the man said as a thank you, and brought me some food. Daniel was a man of few words, but seemed diligent and sincere, and I found myself drawn to him. After all, if went back to New York, I had no boyfriend and no significant position at my company. Furthermore, by that time, my father had passed away, and since I had no siblings, my mother was living alone. I was tired of city life and began to feel that marrying and settling down in my hometown wouldn't be so bad. So, I married Daniel, and we began living in my family home. Daniel was open to living with my mother because his sister, Mary, and her husband were already living with his parents. Daniel and I were blessed with 2 children, a son and a daughter, and we should have been living a happy married life. But after my mother passed and the children became independent and left the house, I faced an unbelievable misfortune. Daniel, always a quiet man, spoke very little at home after we got married. He didn't involve himself more than necessary in parenting. Perhaps you could say Daniel was a calm type of husband, a gentleman if spoken well of. Having been an only child, I was always close to my mother, consulting her on everything. So, I believe I've been able to raise my kids ideally with the help of my mother. This perfect life changed abruptly right after my mother passed away. My mother had always found joy in taking care of the family, and after the kids went off to college in the city and left the house, she quickly lost her spirits. And then, before long, she departed to heaven. I had thought that now, with just Daniel and me, we'd spend our days peacefully as a couple. But after my mother died, Daniel's personality changed completely, as if he flipped over his hand. The man who was once so gentle suddenly started calling me you in a rude tone and became overbearing. "Hey, you. If you're not busy, at least make some coffee," he would say while sprawly lying in the living room daily, bossing me around. He had never even lain down outside our bedroom before. What on earth happened? Maybe he had been tiptoeing around my mother, his mother-in-law, all this time. But now, he's become arrogant and condescending in ways I've never seen before, even me as his wife. Maybe he feels it's time to let his hair down now that he doesn't have to tiptoe around my mother, but this sudden change has taken me by surprise. Even our children, who come home occasionally, were stunned by Daniel's transformation. What's worse, when they do come back, Daniel just stays glued to the TV and won't move from the living room. And if the children even try to change the channel, he snaps, "Ah. You're in the way. Go somewhere else." This has made them quite unhappy. It seems they're uncomfortable being around their father Daniel, who is now so boldly asserting his presence in a home where they were originally nurtured by me and my mother. Consequently, our children who used to come back for every long weekend now only return for certain holidays. No matter that the in-laws are gone, this attitude is too much. I couldn't take it anymore and decided to casually remark Daniel. "Hey, dear. You seem different lately, what's up with that?" "Different? What do you mean? Maybe since my mother passed? You used to be so gentle, but now you seem quick to anger." When I said that, Daniel's eyes narrowed and he answered with a voice that had an edge to it. "What are you talking about? I've been tiptoeing around your mother all this time. But now that she's gone, I'm the one who calls the shots in this house. If there's something I don't like, it's only natural that I get angry." I had never seen Daniel so intimidating before, and I recoiled in fear. It seems that all the care he took around my mother had been a source of stress for him. However, I never in my wildest dreams thought that Daniel would change so drastically. Ever since, I've had to tread carefully around Daniel, as if to handle him with kid gloves. The misfortunes that have befallen me since my mother passed away don't stop there. I work part-time until 3 p.m. and then return home to do the housework, which has become my daily routine. When my mother was alive, we would enjoy our tea time together at this hour. Now, it's become a completely dreary time. When I get home, my mother-in-law and Mary are waiting at the entrance. "Oh, Sophia, you're quite late. We've been waiting out here in the cold for 40 minutes, that's right. We heard you finish work at 3 p.m., so we came to match that time. Why are you so late?" "Yeah, Sophia. We heard you get off work at 3 p.m., so we timed our visit to match that. Why are you so late?" Indeed, these two have learned that my part-time job ends at 3 p.m., and they've taken to showing up at our house at this time every day. In their home, my in-laws live with Mary and her husband. Mary has taken her husband's surname, Williams, and like us, she has had her husband move into her parental home. They don't have children, and Mary, who hasn't worked for a long time, is always clinging to my mother-in-law. I used to think my mother-in-law and Mary were kind people when my mother was alive. But just like Daniel, these two started to speak very frankly to me as soon as my mother passed away. Sorry about that. I was doing some shopping on the way back. Thinking of the complaints I would hear later if I showed any displeasure to these two, I can only obey meekly. And so, I always end up letting them into the house. Once inside, I need to change my clothes and put away the groceries I've bought. But before I can even do that, my mother-in-law starts to nag. "We've come all this way to visit and you don't even offer us a drink? We have no choice but to order steaks delivery again, so you'll pay for it." Mary laughs alongside her. Even though it's nearly 4 p.m., they decide to order delivery food from a restaurant at such a late hour. And, as always, I'm the one who ends up paying. I've been living these hellish days for 2 years now. Of course, I've talked to Daniel about it, but he never takes my side. Mom and Mary think you're lonely after losing your mother, they're just trying to be thoughtful. Complaining would be ungrateful. But every time they come, we only eat expensive steaks, and I'm always the one paying. It's making us run a deficit every month. You should just manage our finances better. If it's not enough, find a part-time job that pays more. Besides, you took great care of your own parents but seem cold to my family, don't you think? When he puts it that way, I'm left speechless. I don't want to quit my current part-time job because the people there are nice. Despite living at my parents' home, I have never neglected my in-laws' home. I've always made an appearance when Daniel's relatives gathered, and I brought Christmas gifts and birthday presents to his parents' house on some occasions. They used to be kind to me whenever I showed up, Mary and my mother-in-law alike. Why did their attitudes change so abruptly after my mother passed away? I don't know what to do, and the stress has been gradually mounting. Amid these troubling days, an even more astonishing situation arose. One evening, Daniel came home from work and announced something unbelievable. "My parents' and sister's family are moving in next week, so get your room cleaned out." What? What's happening all of a sudden? I panicked at this abrupt news. What do you mean, what's happening? It's just like I said. Everyone's moving in this Saturday, so hurry up. That meant I had only 3 days left. Daniel had decided this major change without consulting me, just arranged it with his own family. Hey, you can't just decide this on your own. This house originally belonged to my family. Quiet. It doesn't matter who it originally belonged to, I'm the head of this house now, and I make the decisions. No complaining. I was so shocked by his horrible attitude that I dropped the dish I was washing, and it shattered on the floor. Then, with a sharp crack, the plate I was holding split into 2 pieces. You're so clumsy. That's why I've become sick of being around you. What do you mean by that? I was caught in Daniel's words, wanting to know what he meant. Then Daniel replied with a sneer and a sarcastic tone. Since it's a good opportunity, let me be clear. Mom and Mary like this house and want to live here, but it seems they don't like you. I don't like being with you either. So, since you're in the way, you need to get out.
But that's...
Yeah, of course, just like I said earlier, pack up all your stuff. I'll be away on a business trip for the next 3 days, so get it done by then. Daniel had been so cruel to me. Angry at his reasoning, I decided without hesitation to take a certain action. Then, I'll clear out the entire house. When I said that, Daniel smirked maliciously.
Huh, I thought you'd put up more of a fight, but you're surprisingly submissive.
He seemed very pleased, thinking everything was going his way. Unaware that he would regret how he treated me in 3 days. The following day. Oblivious, Daniel left for his business trip. I immediately made a call to carry out the arrangements I had planned. And before Daniel returned, I had everything in order and left the house. I can already picture the look of surprise on Daniel's face when he comes back. The place I was headed was the apartment of my daughter, Lucy, who lives alone in New York. 3 nights ago, I had already gotten in touch with Lucy in advance.
I've been waiting for you, Mom.
Is everything taken care of?
Yes, all set.
But sorry for suddenly imposing on you like this.
It's fine.
But still, Dad's terrible, isn't he? To suddenly try to kick you out.
Yes.
But don't worry, I made sure to set things straight before I came here. Dad's going to be quite surprised later. I said that and burst into laughter with Lucy. There was a reason I had come to Lucy's place. Late into the night, as expected, Daniel called in a panic.
You! What the hell is this? The house is empty. Where are all the furniture and appliances?
Oh. But wasn't that what you said? To pack up all my things.
I said to pack up everything in your room, not everything in the house.
Indeed, Daniel had initially said, pack up your room. But after telling me to leave, he said, pack up all your stuff. You wanted me to leave, right? So, I got rid of all my furniture and appliances that I inherited from my mother. Now, your family can move in without any worries, right? Yes, the actions I had taken over these 3 days started with having all the furniture and appliances I used picked up by a recycling company. Then, I contacted movers to transport the belongings that belonged to the kids and the things I would still use to Lucy's apartment. I felt bad for the inconvenience to Lucy, but she was eager to get back at Daniel and agreed to help. After a while, Daniel, sounding a bit troubled, started to speak. Actually, the whole thing about my parents' and sister's family moving in was a lie. Mom and Mary, they both might be getting divorced.
Oh, really?
So, they're planning to run away to your place, huh? I retorted as if I had known all along. What? You're not surprised? They both might be getting divorced, you know? Well, I knew that already. Huh? Daniel sounded baffled. I had made sure to contact my father-in-law and Mary's husband, Anthony, over these 3 days. So, I was fully aware of the whole situation with the in-laws. Actually, Anthony is from New York, and he had been interested in a local revitalization matchmaking event held in our area, so he participated on a whim. There, he was liked by Mary, who approached him aggressively, and even her mother persuaded him persistently until he agreed to marry her. Then, at the request of Mary and my mother-in-law, he ended up moving into the in-laws' house. After getting married, the mother-in-law, who was biased towards Mary, let her do whatever she wanted, and it seems Anthony had a hard time because of their capricious behavior. Moreover, Mary stopped cooking once she started coming to my place in the evenings. Well, it makes sense since they ate so many steaks every evening, so of course they didn't cook. This had been going on for 2 years, so my father-in-law got furious and told Mary and his wife to get out. I felt relieved when Anthony told me about it. And then Daniel, hearing that his mother and Mary were about to be kicked out, decided to let them move into our house. They would be bringing just the bare minimum of their belongings, so they would be in trouble without furniture or appliances. By the way, when Daniel said he was going on a business trip, he was actually going to plead with his father to forgive the 2 women. But since his father wouldn't agree, he had no choice but to help them pack up their things. When I told Daniel everything I heard from Anthony, I could faintly hear someone say, "Well, what a calculating wife." From his end, it seemed his mother was eavesdropping.
Sophia, what are you going to do about this? We can't live like this with nothing here. Yeah. And to think you even talked to my husband behind my back, how terrible of you.
There was Mary as well. Oh. You all seem to be in quite a bind. By the way, I also asked Anthony if he could forgive you too. He said if you spend a night to cool off and reflect, you can come back home tomorrow morning. Really? Mary and her mother, perhaps delighted, were making a racket with excitement. Sophia, I take back what I said earlier. Turns out, you do have your good points, don't you? Daniel said, sounding disappointed even though he had brought the two women home. Well, it's good for the two of them, but what about me? Can't you at least bring back the appliances? Oh, by the way, while I was at it, I arranged to sell the house, so please move out soon, okay?
Hey!
Daniel's voice rose, almost as if he couldn't believe what I said.
I'm your husband. How could you do this to me?
Oh? But weren't you the one trying to kick me out? That in itself is quite the harsh treatment. Daniel fell silent, with nothing to say in return. I pressed further. Oh, and by the way, your stuff is all still in the house, isn't it? That small desk you use as a study. Check the drawer. I've sorted out the necessary application, so just submit it properly, okay? I could hear Daniel's footsteps as he hurried to the back room where the desk was. Opening the drawer, he muttered.
This is a divorce form?
Yes, that's right. Once you've filed, I'll proceed it through the third party. Don't joke with me. Why should we have to get a divorce? Well, you wanted me out, didn't you? That's the same as a divorce, isn't it? Daniel probably never imagined that the seeds he sowed would be reaped in such a way. I thought he had gone silent, but then I heard him sobbing. Then, in a voice laced with sobs, he began to plead desperately.
Please, I'm begging you. I was wrong. I'll take care of you from now on. Can you please reconsider? I'm begging you, believe me.
Daniel was saying this, but I couldn't forgive his misdeeds of caring only for his family and trying to drive me out. It was fine for him to take in his mother-in-law and Mary, but he should have consulted me first. How could I trust a husband who, after neglecting me, decided to take in his mother and sister and kick out his wife? So no matter how much he apologized now, my decision wouldn't change. And the next morning. This time, I received a phone call from Mary.
You liar, Sophia. When I got home, Dad and Anthony were gone, and on top of that, the house was already sold.
Mary sounded very angry. But I remained calm and unfazed. I didn't lie at all. I did say you could come back, but I never said that your father-in-law or brother-in-law would be waiting at home for you. Over the phone, Mary and her mother were saying to each other, "Damn it. We've been deceived." Then, noticing an unmarked envelope in the mailbox, my mother-in-law opened it and let out a loud "Oh." Inside was a letter from my father-in-law addressed to his wife and Mary, and the content of the letter was that both of their husbands wanted a divorce. I had already been informed about the contents of that letter by my father-in-law. My father-in-law had long run out of patience with my mother-in-law, who lacked honesty and was always selfish. So, it seems he had been considering moving into a senior living facility by himself for quite some time. This incident had made him resolve to go through with it, and he said he was going to sell the house. Anthony, too, seems to be planning to divorce Mary, who has been spoiled rotten by her mother, and return to his parents' home in New York.
Sophia, you have to do something. We'll have nowhere to live if things stay like this.
I don't see how this concerns me. Why don't you go to Anthony's place and ask for forgiveness? I suggested, but it seemed Mary was too proud to admit her fault. She stayed silent and began to sob. Next to her, her mother was comforting her, saying, "Poor thing." And then, grabbing the phone from Mary, she shouted as loudly as she could.
You wicked wife! Inhuman!
I was startled by the scream, but it seemed like nothing more than sour grapes. I maintained my composure and delivered my final words. "All right, I understand. Take care and best wishes. Goodbye." I heard a "wait a minute" from the other end, but I hung up without concern. I was done being bothered by the likes of them. After all, it was their own selfish behavior that brought about this misfortune, and they treated me as the villain to the very end. Soon, I will be divorcing Daniel, making these two practically strangers. Once that happens, I likely won't have to deal with them ever again. Daniel didn't submit the divorce papers for a while after that, so I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. As a result of the court proceedings, I was finally able to get a formal divorce from Daniel. Daniel demanded half the proceeds from the sale of the house as part of the property division, but the judge ruled it was not marital property, and his claim was denied.
How can that be? I have nowhere to live. How am I supposed to survive from here on out?
Daniel, enraged by the outcome of the trial, started to yell at me, but he was stopped by the judge. Daniel was completely deflated, but I couldn't find any room for sympathy. It would have been nice if at least Daniel had felt a bit sorry for the daily intrusions by his mother and Mary. My marriage with Daniel ended in the worst state possible. After that, Daniel, now also divorced like his mother and Mary, seemed to be looking for a new home. In the countryside with nothing around, there were no convenient budget hotels or inns. According to a local friend, they were seen setting up cardboard to sleep in the park. At first, Daniel called me asking for help, but recently, even those messages have stopped. Perhaps his phone service has been disconnected. Eventually, I heard rumors that they managed to move into a nearly derelict apartment on the outskirts of town. Daniel's earnings must be barely enough to get by, especially supporting a mother and Mary who have never worked. Mary, who is of an age where she could still be working actively, appears to remain unemployed. Due to her pride, she refuses to work under someone else, no matter how tough life gets. Lately, the loud arguments between the mother and Mary can be heard outside, becoming a nuisance to the neighbors. The mother-in-law, whom I once thought was favoring her kin, turned out to be only looking out for herself. Now in this situation, the non-working Mary seems to be nothing but a burden. Daniel, probably not enjoying living with these two, has recently been addicted to casinos. The earnings that Daniel works so hard for seem to be flying away on the bets at casinos. Friends living back home kept me updated via social media messaging and calls about the situation of these three. To me, it's a story that no longer matters, but when I hear it, I find myself thinking they got what they deserved. Now, I'm living in New York. Just before the divorce was finalized, I had been discussing my plans for the future with Anthony, who had already divorced Mary and returned to New York. It turned out that Anthony's brother ran a food company and offered me a job there. For a while, I stayed with Lucy, but Anthony helped me look for my own place. Thanks to him, I now live alone in a small apartment. I've been completely indebted to Anthony for everything, and I can't thank him enough. Anthony, who has gone through tough times similar to mine, and I find a lot in common to talk about. We both found our spouses at a matchmaking event aimed at revitalizing the region, and both marriages ended in failure. Perhaps that's a strange kind of fate. That matchmaking event hasn't been held for decades now. Despite everything, I still care about my hometown. Seeing fewer people getting married in that area made me worry a bit about the potential depopulation. However, it seems that matchmaking events have disappeared simply because young people nowadays use convenient apps for dating. In my hometown, especially, where encounters are scarce, many couples meet and marry through these apps. Moreover, I've heard from friends that there's been an increase in remote workers who move to the countryside in search of affordable housing. For this reason, I've been told by friends that the number of young people in my hometown is on the rise. Even though I'm away now, it's heartening to know that my hometown is becoming more vibrant. I too am thinking of eventually returning to my hometown to spend a leisurely retirement in the countryside. Lately, I've started dating Anthony with the idea of remarriage in mind. Stomach pain, that's all? Aren't you overreacting a bit? But it could be appendicitis. As I endured the severe pain and managed to convey this, John snorted through his nose, laughing and dismissing my words, saying it couldn't be true. I'm about to go on a trip with my sister, go to the hospital yourself. In my fading consciousness, I desperately tried to call out to my husband as he left. Wait! But he closed the front door without listening to my pleading voice or Helen's crying. As I curled up in pain, Helen ran to me, crying. Mom, are you gonna die? Don't die. I hugged her small sobbing body, trying to reassure her. I don't remember much after that, but I woke up in the hospital, had some paperwork done, and managed to undergo surgery, staying until the next day. The diagnosis was indeed appendicitis. 3 days later, I was discharged and slowly returning to my usual life. While having dinner with Helen, I received a call from John. He started the conversation with,
Help me!
Turns out, he had an accident on the trip, and the car was no longer usable, needing a pickup. Who is this? I decided to pretend to be a stranger and hung up. The next afternoon, John and Samantha returned home. They burst through the front door, stomping loudly.
And why didn't you come to pick us up? We had to catch a taxi, and it cost extra for both taxi and train fares.
Their angry shouts and footsteps were loud until they reached the living room, where they were greeted by an unexpected scene. Welcome back. You must have had a tough time, I said coldly, glaring at them. In the room, besides Helen and me, were Robert, my parents, and my in-laws, all 14 eyes glaring at John and Samantha in anger. My name isn't Taylor. I live with my husband John and our daughter Helen. I met John on a dating app when I was still working in accounting at a trading company. After dating for about 2.5 years, he proposed to me.
I will make you happy, Anne.
John was tall, sociable, cheerful, and popular at work. As for me, I'm introverted, soft-spoken, and can't say no to requests. It seemed like John was too good for someone like me. Yet, he couldn't seem to maintain a relationship with a woman. When I asked him why, he just shrugged, as puzzled as I was. Well, maybe it's just a matter of compatibility, he would say with a light laugh, but after our marriage, I discovered that he was incredibly attached to his older sister, Samantha, a classic case of a brother complex. John had been taken care of by Samantha since they were kids, as their parents both worked. He had a habit of prioritizing her requests and words above everything else. This was occasional during our dating period, but I had hoped it would change after we got married and he settled into our family. However, my expectation was wrong. Samantha's involvement didn't cease even after our marriage. One weekend, while we were at a cafe, John's phone rang. Hey, your phone's ringing.
Oh, it's my sister.
When I told him, he happily answered Samantha's call. After a few nods, he abruptly stood up. Sorry, I gotta go help my sister with some shopping, you go on ahead. But today was our day off, we were going to see a movie. We can always watch it some other time. With that, he rushed off in the opposite direction of the movie theater. Even when I told John that as newlyweds, we should value our time together more, he merely dismissed it lightly. I had also spoken to my in-laws about their relationship, hoping they would be considerate, but it had no effect. Samantha, unmarried and living with parents, often turned to John for company, as her friends were married and less available. Whether it was John's inability to detach from his sister or vice versa, or both, I decided to refrain from intervening for a while. After our daughter, Helen, was born the following year, I became busy with household chores and childcare. John took paternity leave and helped with Helen and the housework, but still prioritized Samantha's requests. Samantha's insensitivity was evident even after Helen's birth. She would visit unannounced, staying until John returned, disturbing Helen's naps, and asking for food, which she'd eat and then chat with John until dinner. And, thank you for the meal. I always feel bad, she'd say, patting her stomach contentedly. But I couldn't understand why I had to satisfy Samantha's hunger at our family's expense. It would have been slightly more tolerable if she helped with the dishes, but she only demanded desserts after eating. Such surprise visits continued even as Helen grew. I've asked her to call in advance or give some notice a few days before visiting, as it's inconvenient when she comes unannounced. However, she has never once given prior notice. Samantha, I've told you many times, we need some notice for grocery shopping.
Oh, did I?
Sorry, forgot. She'd laugh off, unapologetically, just like John. And there were other incidents like these. When Helen was about to turn 3, we planned a family trip to go apple picking. On the eve of our trip, I received a call from Samantha. She had gotten tickets to a comedy show for the next day and invited us to join. John, far from declining, was excited to go. What about apple picking? We've been planning this for a month. Yeah, but it's sad for my sister to go to the show alone, isn't it? It'd be a waste to let the ticket go unused. But Helen has been looking forward to going with you. Please come with us. Well, then we'll just have to change the date. I couldn't understand why it had to be this way and felt overwhelmed. I know Samantha is important to you, but can't you prioritize Helen and me, your family? John became indignant.
What are you talking about? It's only natural to care for my only sibling. You're second, Helen is third.
In the end, we didn't go apple picking. Instead, Helen and I saw John off to the comedy show and just took a walk in the nearby park. Watching Helen happily play among the autumn leaves, I felt a pang of sadness. On a day when the sky seemed higher and the mornings and evenings grew colder. That day was John's day off, and the three of us, including Helen, were spending family time together. As usual, after finishing my chores, I felt a sharp pain in my right side. I had felt a bit off since the morning but thought it would pass. I had a terrible suspicion that it might be appendicitis. As the thought crossed my mind, the pain worsened rapidly, becoming so intense that I couldn't stand up and ended up doubling over in agony right where I was.
John, help me!
When I called for my husband, he appeared, already dressed up as if he was about to go somewhere. Following behind, Helen toddled over with her small steps.
Mommy? What's wrong?
John asked me in a half-hearted tone, as if just asking to be polite.
My stomach hurts. I can't move. Can you take me to the hospital?
I managed to answer through the severe pain. Hearing my plea, Helen started crying, calling out, "Mommy, Mommy.
You're making too much of a stomach ache."
But it might be appendicitis. He snorted through his nose, dismissing my concern.
I've got a trip planned with my sister, you can go to the hospital yourself.
He turned and went back to his room, then came out with a small suitcase and briskly headed for the front door. In my dazed state, I desperately tried to stop him.
Wait! My stomach really hurts!
Ignoring my pleading voice and Helen's cries, John closed the front door and left. As I curled up in pain, Helen came running to me, crying.
Mommy, are you going to die? Please don't die!
I tried to reassure her by hugging her small sobbing body, but I could barely muster any strength. Who else could I rely on? Then I remembered my brother. He is Robert Smith. We hadn't been in touch much since I got married, but he should still be living near my house. He might be out, but I had no one else to turn to. I had Helen fetch my smartphone, and with trembling fingers, I called Robert. The phone rang, and the seemingly endless call tone echoed through the speaker. I waited, praying for a response. Suddenly, the ringing stopped, and I heard a voice say, "Hello? Anne? It's been a while, what's up?" His casual voice was a relief.
Brother, my stomach hurts. I can't move. Please take me to the hospital. What? Are you okay? I'm coming right now.
Robert sensed the urgency in my voice and responded tensely. Robert didn't hang up the phone, instead reassuring me with words like, "Don't worry, and is Helen there? Is she okay?" During this time, I could hear the sounds of him locking his house and starting his car engine, clearly hurrying to come over. Robert has always been the caring type since I was little. Whether I got lost or failed my first choice in high school admissions, he always encouraged me, saying, "Don't worry, it'll be okay." He's my reliable and proud brother. Now, he was chatting with Helen, keeping her from getting anxious, which made me feel much stronger. Soon, I heard the sound of a car pulling up outside, and Robert's voice came through the phone. "I'm here." "Coming in." Helen, with unsteady steps, went to the front door to greet him and told him where I was. Robert, dressed in a t-shirt and chinos, looking quite casual, rushed in. This was his usual outfit when he's off work and just popping out to the convenience store for lunch. "Hang in there, Anne. It's okay now, your brother's here." "Come on, Helen, let's go. You're worried about Mom, right?" He carried me to his car parked outside, seated both me and Helen in it, and drove us quickly to the hospital. I don't remember much after that, but when I came to, I was in the hospital, having completed some paperwork and somehow finished the surgery. The diagnosis was indeed appendicitis, and I had to stay until the next day. With John gone on his trip, I had no choice but to call my parents for help with Helen's care and explain the situation. They were furious on the other end of the phone but only said, "We'll take care of Helen, just focus on your treatment," before hanging up. When I briefly explained to Robert, he was equally furious. "Wait, John left you two to go on a trip?" "Why?" "He went because Samantha asked him to." "Please, take Helen to Mom and Dad's place." Helen, exhausted from crying, was already fast asleep in the chair next to me. "Sure, I'll take care of Helen. You just get some rest." Luckily, Robert would take Helen to our parents' house. As for her clothes and other necessities, we always kept an overnight bag ready at their place, just in case, so there was nothing to worry about. After Robert and Helen left the hospital room, I finally had a moment to breathe. 3 days passed, and I was discharged from the hospital, gradually getting back to my normal life. My recovery was going well, and today, I could comfortably enjoy a meal with Helen. We were having omelets for dinner. Helen was still struggling to use the spoon properly, but was eating without complaint. Then, my smartphone rang. I checked the screen, curious to see who it was, and saw it was John. For a moment, I considered ignoring the call due to its persistent ringing, but I eventually decided to answer it.
"Help me!"
John cried out as soon as I answered, explaining through tears that he had an accident on his trip, the car was no longer usable, and he needed a pickup.
"My car's busted, and I'm stuck here with Samantha. And you can drive, right? Come pick us up."
Listening to their childish wailing over the phone, I sighed and responded. Who is this? What are you talking about?" "It's me, don't you recognize my voice?" John's angry response, reminiscent of some scam call, seemed almost comical to me. "Sorry, I can't hear you clearly. I'm going to hang up now." I decided to pretend to be a stranger and, ignoring their cries of "wait a minute," I ended the call. "Who was that?" "Oh, just a wrong number." I quietly set my smartphone to block John's calls and continued dinner with Helen. The next day, in the afternoon, John and Samantha returned home. They burst through the front door, stomping loudly.
"And why didn't you come to pick us up? We had to catch a taxi, and it cost extra for both the taxi and train fares."
Their angry shouts and footsteps were loud until they reached the living room, where they were greeted by an unexpected scene.
"Welcome back. You must have had a tough time,"
I said coldly, glaring at them. Besides Helen and me, there were Robert, my parents, and John's parents, all 14 eyes glaring angrily at John and Samantha. "Why is everyone here?" John stood there, dumbfounded by the situation, so I explained it to him. "You do realize what you've done, right? You left me and Helen to go on a trip. After that, I had to be hospitalized. I've told everything to both my parents and yours," I said in one breath, blaming John. John looked baffled, almost as if he wanted to say, "So what's the big deal? But in the end, you were okay, right?" You have no idea how worried and helpless Helen and I felt. "Samantha, you could have been more considerate. You're always dragging John around for your errands." "What? Why am I being scolded? I didn't know about your situation." Both John and Samantha remained adamant that they weren't at fault, instead starting to complain about why I hadn't come to pick them up the day before. I was so angry with both of them that I wanted to slap them right there, but I restrained myself, clenching my fists instead. I couldn't forgive John for choosing to go on a trip with his real sister over his suffering wife and anxious, crying daughter. That's why I had called both our parents and in-laws here for a discussion, but instead of talking it out, John and Samantha faced a barrage of criticism from both families. Helen, scared by the commotion, started crying and clung to my mother. Despite this, my father angrily said, "We trusted you with our daughter, what were you thinking?" And John's mother exclaimed, "You two have gone too far." The pair, usually so assertive, finally looked taken aback, realizing they were completely surrounded by disapproval. John's father sternly ordered, "Kneel down and apologize to and, both of you," leading to John and Samantha reluctantly kneeling down. "We're sorry, we won't do it again. I apologize." Receiving such an insincere apology at this point only intensified my anger, leaving me standing there seething with frustration. I was foolish to have expected even a bit of sincerity from them. Controlling my irritation, I presented them with divorce papers. "We're getting a divorce. I've thought it over these last 3 days, and I can't be with you anymore." John's eyes widened. "Divorce is an overreaction," he protested. "You won't be able to live on your own at your age. I don't need a father who doesn't prioritize his family. I'll protect and raise Helen no matter what, so don't worry." I spoke coldly, and John seemed at a loss. John was understandably taken aback, as I had never before rebutted or stood up so strongly against him. This was a side of me he had never seen before. Despite this, he continued to resist and started making various excuses. "If we get divorced, how will people at work see me? Are you trying to ruin my reputation?" "I don't care what happens to your reputation. We're getting divorced." "And what about this house? I'm the one who took out the mortgage. Are you okay with losing your home?" "I've already thought about all that during these 3 days. I've discussed it with my parents, and Helen and I will return to my parents' house." "Wait, what about Helen? Have you asked her what she wants?" John's face lit up as if he had come up with a brilliant idea, but his desperate attempt to bring our daughter into the argument only served to irritate me further. "Why don't you ask her yourself?" John, now visibly shaken, turned to Helen for support. "Helen, you don't want to live without Daddy, do you?" Helen, who had been with my mother until then, shook her head and said through tears when John addressed her, "Daddy's not fun to be with. He never plays with me, always goes out with Auntie. I don't need him. I just need Mommy." Hearing Helen say she didn't need him was undoubtedly a shock to John. John's parents, overhearing this, were even more outraged. "How can a father let his young child feel this way? What kind of person are you?" they exclaimed. John's mother snatched the divorce papers from my hand and slammed them down in front of him, sternly demanding that he agree to the divorce. His face turned red, as if sprouting horns in anger, and he visibly trembled. John signed the divorce papers and then broke down in tears, but no one offered him any sympathy. I wondered if he would have paid more attention to his family had he known it would come to this. But I doubted it. Even if he had known, his actions probably wouldn't have changed. Later, I filed the divorce papers at the city hall, and it was successfully processed. I was free. My in-laws apologized again and agreed to pay more than the usual amount in child support. John ended up selling the house and moving back with his parents, commuting to work from there. John, having his commuting route changed, was teased by his colleagues. He inadvertently mentioned that he was commuting from his parents' home because of his divorce. This quickly became the talk of his department, and for a while, he faced a mix of sympathetic and pitying looks from his coworkers. My cousin, who lived near my in-laws and was known as the speaker in our family. She is known to spread news quickly, therefore, it didn't take long for the entire neighborhood to know about our divorce and the reasons behind it. Within days, everyone in the neighborhood knew about it, proving that her knack for communication was not to be underestimated. As a result, John and Samantha faced scornful glances even for simple trips to the convenience store. As a result of this widespread gossip, the relationship between John and his sister became strained. "Why are you blaming me? If you hadn't gotten divorced, none of this would have happened. It's your fault. If you hadn't interfered with my family, this wouldn't have happened. Show some restraint. You always said you cared more about me than your family every time I asked you out. It seems that my cousin overheard these kinds of exchanges between John and his sister. Helen and I left the house we had lived in and moved back with my parents. My mother took care of me, looking after Helen while I was busy running errands and handling various procedures for a few days. My father, too, was very fond of her, often taking her out in his car to the library to borrow books or to train crossings to watch the trains, making her days enjoyable and fulfilling. Robert also moved closer to our parents' house. When I asked Robert what brought about the sudden move, he explained that his office had relocated, changing his nearest train station, so he moved closer to our family home. It's a coincidence, but I rented an apartment near our parents' house. Helen can come over to play anytime. I've got snacks and juice ready. Candy! Helen's eyes sparkled at the mention of sweets, and she joyfully bounced around, humming apple pie for me. I'm glad you're excited, Robert, but don't give her too much sugar, okay? He laughed and replied, I know. With the support of my family, I was able to start job hunting. Despite the gap in my resume due to childbirth and childcare, I found a job at a small office that seemed willing to hire someone for accounting work. The company, under the president's direction, aimed to create a workplace supportive of parenting. Most employees were mothers, and there was a manual to accommodate sudden early departures or pickups of children in the evening. My parents were impressed and happy with this arrangement. Helen started attending kindergarten and began learning various games and words. This is a maple leaf, and this yellow one is a ginkgo. They're beautiful, aren't they? I said, showing her the red and yellow paper leaves she had made at kindergarten, somewhat clumsily shaped but recognizable. It became clear that she liked beautiful leaves and was becoming skillful with her hands, using scissors more frequently. I remembered how we missed going leaf peeping once and decided to find a nearby spot for it. I discussed it with my parents and Helen, and we planned to go during the next long weekend. I also invited Robert, and he agreed to come. I'll bring lots of snacks. Remember, Helen's snack budget is $10. I reminded him, causing everyone, including my parents and Helen, to burst into laughter. It seemed like Robert didn't quite understand a parent's wish for their child to eat properly, not just snacks, even in the season of hearty appetites. Nevertheless, his affection for Helen was heartwarming. Helen and I continued to live happily with support from our loving family.